At 1:47 a.m., Daniel Carter realized the Arsenal ghost wasn't outside the FBI. He was inside it. And the bait he was about to use was his best friend. 4 days into the SHOT Show, my agents dropped like dominoes. The weapons vanished like smoke. And the only person still standing was me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The fluorescent lights in the FBI's Strategic Operations Center hummed with the kind of persistent buzz that gets under your skin after midnight. Daniel Carter stood before the glass wall overlooking the bullpen, watching analysts pack up their workstations one by one. 47 years old, 23 of them spent chasing ghosts through the labyrinth of international arms trafficking, and he'd never felt closer to madness than he did in that moment. 7 years. $280 million in stolen military hardware, and not a single goddamn fingerprint. The Arsenal Ghost, that's what the press had started calling him after the third federal operation fell apart. Portable missiles that could take down a commercial airliner had vanished from a locked facility in Maryland. Classified weapon prototypes that shouldn't have existed outside Defense Department labs had surfaced on black markets in 3 continents. Each time the pattern was the same: meticulous planning, inside knowledge, and an ability to anticipate law enforcement moves that bordered on precognition. Daniel's reflection stared back at him from the glass, and he barely recognized the man looking back. His wife had left 2 years ago, unable to compete with an obsession she couldn't understand. His daughter called once a month if he was lucky, her voice carrying that careful distance adult children develop when they've accepted their parent as fundamentally unknowable. But it wasn't just obsession anymore. It was the growing certainty that something was wrong at a level he couldn't articulate. The ghost didn't just know where weapons were stored. He knew when operations were planned, when surveillance would be active, when teams would be deployed. The leak was somewhere close, maybe too close. His phone buzzed. A message from upstairs. The director wanted to see him. At 1:47 a.m., that couldn't mean anything good. Director Walsh sat behind his desk with calculated casualness, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. 7 years, Carter. 7 years, and we're no closer than we were when this started. The Senate Oversight Committee is asking questions about whether we need fresh leadership on this case. Daniel remained standing, hands behind his back. I'm aware of the political pressure, sir. Are you? Walsh leaned forward. Because I'm giving you one final chance. The SHOT Show, Las Vegas, next month. Biggest firearms industry convention in history. $20 billion in contracts. Every major defense contractor will be there, plus prototypes that make our previous losses look like pocket change. Daniel picked up the file Walsh slid across the desk. You think he'll surface? I think if the ghost is real, he can't resist this. But here's the thing, Carter. I want you to do something radical. Walsh paused. Michael Reeves still owns that warehouse facility outside Vegas, doesn't he? The one he converted from his bureau days. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach at the mention of the name. Michael Reeves. 20 years of friendship. Countless operations together before Michael left the bureau to start his private security consulting firm. The man had been best man at Daniel's wedding, had held his daughter when she was born, had been there during the divorce with bourbon and silence. That's when I noticed the one thing that didn't belong. He does, Daniel said carefully. I want you to concentrate the highest value items there. Use Reeves's facility as a controlled environment. It won't be a setup. The weapons will be real. The security will be real. The ghost has never fallen for honey traps, so we won't give him one. Walsh's eyes gleamed. This is happening, Carter. The only question is whether you're running it or watching from the sidelines. Daniel sat in his car for 10 minutes before starting the engine, staring at his phone and the contact labeled simply, Reeves, M. When he finally made the call, Michael answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. Danny, it's almost 3 in the morning. What's wrong? I need to see you. Tomorrow. It's important. A pause. Just a fraction of a second. But Daniel caught it. This about the ghost? Yeah. Then I'll make time. My office, 10 a.m. Make it your place. This conversation needs to be private. After he hung up, Daniel wondered when exactly he'd started lying to the people closest to him, because he hadn't told Walsh the complete truth. 3 months ago, he'd started keeping a separate file. Not in the bureau system, a physical file hidden in a safe deposit box. Patterns he couldn't bring himself to report officially. Patterns like Michael Reeves being in proximity to 4 out of 7 major theft locations within the week before they occurred. Business trips, he'd said. Consulting work, perfectly legitimate. Patterns like Michael renovating his Vegas facility 18 months ago with security systems that seemed excessive for a private consultant. Biometric scanners, thermal imaging, vault systems that rivaled federal installations. Patterns like the hesitation Daniel had just heard on the phone. That fraction of a second pause before Michael agreed to meet. I didn't know it yet, but I'd just helped him plan the perfect crime. Michael's house sat in the hills overlooking Henderson, a modernist cube of glass and steel. Daniel had been here dozens of times. Barbecues, poker nights, quiet evenings. Now he approached the front door like a crime scene, every sense heightened. Michael opened before he could knock, already dressed despite the early hour. At 52, he maintained the compact build of someone who'd never stopped training. "Coffee?" Michael asked. They sat across from each other at the granite island, and Daniel laid out the operation. Every detail. The shot show, the concentration of assets, the use of Michael's facility. He watched his friend's face carefully, cataloging every flicker of expression. When he finished, Michael was quiet for a long moment, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Then he set it down slowly. "You're using me as bait. I'm using your facility as a controlled environment. Don't bullshit me, Danny. You're betting the ghost will come after the weapons, and you want him to come to a place where I'll be. You'll be protected, full tactical team. That's not what I asked." Michael's hazel eyes held steady. "Why my place? Why not a federal facility?" "Because the ghost has gotten into federal facilities. We need somewhere unexpected. Somewhere that doesn't follow bureau protocols exactly." It was a good answer, mostly true, but not the complete truth. Michael stood and walked to the window, looking out at the desert. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. 20 years we've known each other. You were there when Sarah died. You told me it was okay to leave the bureau." He turned back. "So I'm going to do this for you. But Danny, if something feels wrong, you pull the plug immediately. Promise me that." "I promise." They shook hands, and as Daniel drove back down the winding hill road, he added one more entry to his mental file. Michael had agreed too quickly. Someone truly concerned about risk would have asked more questions. Unless that someone already knew exactly how the operation would unfold. The next 3 weeks moved with inexorable momentum. Daniel assembled his team, 20 of the Bureau's best, each vetted personally. The weapons began arriving at Michael's facility in unmarked trucks, missile systems worth $40 million apiece, next-generation targeting computers, electromagnetic pulse generators that existed in exactly 3 places on Earth. The security installation was meticulous. Thermal scanners covered every approach, motion sensors networked in redundant grids, biometric access points requiring fingerprints, iris scans, voice recognition, and real-time behavioral analysis. Daniel supervised every detail personally, sleeping 4 hours a night. He saw Michael frequently during those weeks, coordinating protocols, running drills. And with each meeting, Daniel felt the distance growing, not in what they said, but in what they didn't say. If I'm wrong about Michael, I've just destroyed my last family. On the night before the SHOT Show opened, Daniel stood in Michael's vault, looking at enough firepower to start a small war. His team was positioned throughout the facility. Surveillance monitors showed every angle, every entrance sealed tight. Michael joined him carrying 2 bottles of beer. He handed one to Daniel. 2 successful operations. They clinked bottles, but Daniel barely tasted the beer, because he'd just noticed something. The surveillance feeds showed his tactical team in position, But he couldn't see Michael's personal security detail, the 3 ex-military contractors Michael had mentioned hiring. "Where's your guys?" Daniel asked casually. "Gave them the night off. Figured with your team here, we didn't need the overlap." Michael's smile was easy, natural. "Besides, if the ghost is as good as they say, 3 more bodies won't make a difference. Still, I'd feel better with maximum coverage." "Danny, relax. You've built a fortress here." Michael clapped him on the shoulder. "Go get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But Daniel didn't sleep. He sat in the surveillance center, watching feeds, drinking coffee that tasted like copper, waiting for the catastrophe he could feel approaching like distant thunder. Day 1 of the SHOT Show passed without incident. 80,000 attendees flooded the Las Vegas Convention Center. Daniel split his attention between the convention floor and Michael's facility, his team reporting status every 30 minutes. Day 2. Nothing. Day 3. Nothing. By day 4, Daniel wasn't relieved. He was terrified. Because the ghost didn't ignore opportunities like this. He studied them. He waited for the exact moment when vigilance began to crack. The call came at 2:17 p.m. A security guard at the convention center, voice shaking. Weapons were missing from 3 different booths. Not display models, actual inventory. Panic began rippling through the show floor. Daniel's radio exploded with chatter. His team at the convention center requesting immediate support. Reports of attendees collapsing, possible chemical agent. The situation spiraling from controlled to chaos in seconds. He turned to Michael, who'd insisted on being present. "He knows we concentrated security at your facility. He's hitting the show itself." "Then go," Michael said. "I'll maintain watch here with your backup team." Daniel hesitated for a fraction of a second, but the screaming on the radio was getting worse, and every instinct said people were in danger. He took 6 agents and ran, and that's when the trap snapped shut. On me. The convention center was pandemonium. Attendees streaming toward exits, security trying to establish order. Daniel reached the first reported theft location and found exactly nothing. No missing weapons. Inventory matched perfectly. He sprinted to the second location. Same thing. Everything accounted for. And then, his agents started dropping. The first one stumbled, caught himself against a booth wall, collapsed. The second went down 20 feet away. A third agent grabbed Daniel's arm, pupils dilated to pinpoints, and whispered water before her legs gave out. Daniel pulled out his bottle. He'd been too wired to drink much, and tasted it carefully. Normal. But when he checked his agent's bottles, he caught a faint chemical smell. His radio crackled. The facility. He needed to call the facility. Michael wasn't answering. The backup team's direct line. Nothing. The world seemed to slow down, everything clicking into terrible focus. The ghost hadn't come for the convention center. The panic, the reports, the chemical agent, all misdirection. The target had always been Michael's facility, and Daniel had just removed his primary response team. He ran for his car. The drive should have taken 20 minutes. He made it in 11, running red lights, siren clearing traffic he barely saw. Michael's facility looked normal from the outside. No forced entry, no alarms. Daniel's tactical training screamed at him to wait for backup, to assess methodically. Instead, he drew his weapon and entered, his biometric scan working normally. The silence inside was absolute. He found his backup team in the surveillance center, slumped over keyboards and sprawled on the floor. Alive, he checked pulses frantically, but deeply unconscious. The monitors showed nothing unusual. All systems operational. He reached the vault and entered his access code with hands that had gone completely steady. The kind of calm that comes before irreversible decisions. The vault door swung open. Empty. Every weapon, every prototype, every piece of hardware worth $230 million, gone. Vanished as if they'd never existed. Daniel stood in that empty space and felt the cold, final confirmation of what part of him had known all along. The forensic teams found the sedative 3 hours later, a sophisticated compound mixed into the facility's water supply, delivered through the filtration system sometime in the previous 24 hours. Everyone who'd consumed water from the building had been affected. Everyone, except Daniel. He'd barely drunk anything that day, too nervous, too focused. Pure chance, the investigating team concluded. But Daniel knew there was no such thing as coincidence. He checked his bottle anyway, running his own analysis in a lab he trusted. Clean. His water had been clean. Someone had known exactly which agents would drink what, had known Daniel's habits well enough to ensure he remained conscious, and there was only one person who'd observed him that closely. The administrative leave came quietly. No press conference, no perp walk. Just Deputy Director Walsh and 2 agents Daniel had never met appearing at his apartment at dawn. The official line: Daniel Carter was being removed from duty pending an internal investigation into possible involvement in the theft. Your water was clean, Carter. Either you're the luckiest man alive, or you're exactly what the evidence suggests. Walsh's voice held tired disappointment. Michael Reeves is gone. Vanished. And right now, every piece of evidence says you helped him. Daniel didn't fight, didn't protest. He simply said, "Process this as administrative leave while the internal investigation proceeds. Not an arrest. Not yet." Walsh studied him. "Why would I do that?" "Because you need to protect the Bureau's reputation while the investigation continues, and because—" Daniel met his eyes. "If you want to catch the ghost, you need me out there working without official restrictions. That's not how this works. It is, if you want to end this." 3 days later, Daniel Carter was officially on administrative leave pending investigation. The media picked up the story: FBI director under suspicion in major arms theft, and his reputation collapsed in 72 hours. But Daniel didn't care, because for the first time in 7 years, he had clarity. The ghost was one man, Michael Reeves, his friend, his brother in everything but blood. And Michael had made one critical mistake. Over the next 3 months, Daniel became invisible. Beard, cash payments, no usual haunts. Walsh provided minimal support, off-book accounts that wouldn't show up in any audit, untraceable burner phones, access to intelligence data without his name attached. The Bureau needed this case closed, and Walsh was willing to bend procedure to make it happen. It protected both the investigation and the agency's reputation. The official story was that Daniel was under house arrest, monitored constantly. The unofficial truth was that he was hunting. He started with Michael's business dealings, cross-referencing them with the ghost's operations. The pattern emerged slowly, then with devastating clarity. Every major theft had been preceded by Michael visiting that region for consulting work. Maryland, New Mexico, Virginia, Texas, Nevada. Michael had built his cover over years, the respected former agent who'd left to start a legitimate security business. Someone so trusted he could walk into military installations, conduct security audits, and identify every weakness. But there was one problem with Michael's new freedom. He still needed to move the weapons, still needed to complete transactions, and for that, he needed to travel. Daniel tracked flight manifests, shipping records, unusual financial movements. He built a web of Michael's likely contacts, possible buyers, international networks dealing in stolen military hardware. Slowly, a picture emerged of a man expanding operations into new markets. South America, specifically. The Rio connection came from an intercepted phone call, something about a warehouse in Rosina being used for special inventory. It took Daniel 2 weeks to confirm Michael had purchased the building through shell companies. He called Walsh. "I know where he is. You're supposed to be under house arrest. Are you going to help me or not?" Walsh was silent for a long moment. "Then, tell me what you need." The coordination took another month. Brazilian federal police, international warrants, surveillance teams monitoring the warehouse. Walsh initially refused to let Daniel be there personally. "You're too compromised." "That's exactly why I need to be there. He'll see a police raid coming. But if I'm there..." Daniel paused. "He'll want to know how I found him. He'll talk before he runs." That's assuming he doesn't just kill you. He's had 7 years to kill me if that's what he wanted. In the end, Walsh agreed. Daniel would be there as an observer only. No weapon, no badge, no official capacity. Just a former agent closing a personal loop. The favela clung to the hillside like a living organism, concrete and corrugated metal sprawling up slopes where no city planner had ever intended habitation. Daniel moved through narrow streets with a tactical team from Brazil's federal police, their presence generating ripples of attention quickly suppressed. The warehouse sat in a relatively quiet section, a newer concrete structure recently renovated. Surveillance confirmed movement inside. Heat signatures suggested 3, maybe 4 occupants. Daniel waited with the commander in a building across the street, watching through binoculars as teams moved into position. Then a figure emerged from the warehouse's side entrance. Michael Reeves, looking relaxed in casual clothes, checking his phone as he walked toward a black SUV. "Now?" the commander asked. "Wait." Because Michael wasn't alone. 2 men emerged behind him, carrying a large crate. Then a third, clearly security. The commander's radio squawked softly. "All units in position. Awaiting green light." Daniel stood. "I'm going in first." That was not the agreement. "I know." He walked out before anyone could stop him, crossing the street with his hands visible, no weapon, nothing threatening. Just a man approaching an old friend. Michael saw him from 20 feet away. The phone slipped from his hand, clattering on concrete. Security immediately raised weapons, but Michael waved them down, his face cycling through shock, confusion, then something that might have been resignation. "How did you get out?" Michael's voice was steady, but Daniel saw the calculation behind his eyes. "I was never in. Administrative leave while the internal investigation proceeded. I needed you to think you'd won." Daniel kept walking until they were 10 feet apart. "Needed you comfortable enough to move the merchandise." Michael laughed, hollow. "Danny, come on. You really think I'm the ghost, after everything? I checked every weapon before they went into your vault, personally. Scanned for tracking devices, GPS, any electronic signature." Daniel's voice was conversational, almost gentle. "And I know you checked them again after I left, because you're not stupid enough to trust anyone, not even me." "Then how? You forgot to check yourself." Michael went very still. "Remember that last security meeting, when your mic wasn't working right and I fixed it for you?" Daniel continued. "I used a medical-grade patch injector, subcutaneous tracker, completely undetectable without specialized equipment. You've been broadcasting your location to me for 3 months." The sound of sirens began echoing off the hillside, federal police units moving in from multiple directions. Michael's security detail looked to him for orders, but he waved them down, defeated. "I knew you were suspicious," Michael said quietly. "Could see it in how you looked at me those last few weeks, but I thought I'd handled it well enough." "Made you doubt yourself?" "You almost did. Why, Danny? Why let me think I'd won? Why not just arrest me at the facility?" Daniel moved closer, voice dropping so only Michael could hear. "Because I needed proof that would stand up in international court, not just circumstantial evidence. I needed you to lead me to your buyers, your network, your entire operation." He paused. "And because after 20 years, I needed to give you the chance to tell me why." Michael looked at him for a long moment, genuine emotion flickering across his face. "The Bureau burned me out, Danny. 20 years of service. And what did I have? A dead wife, no savings, PTSD they pretended didn't exist. They used me up and expected me to disappear quietly." His voice hardened. "So I built something for myself. Something that would actually take care of me. By becoming everything we used to fight against. By understanding the system is broken, that men like us are disposable to people like Walsh." The police units arrived, heavily armed officers pouring from vehicles. The commander shouted orders in Portuguese, and Michael's security team dropped their weapons. As they moved to arrest Michael, he looked at Daniel one last time. You sacrificed everything to catch me. Your career, your reputation. Was it worth it? Daniel thought about his daughter who wouldn't take his calls, about the director position he'd never hold, about 7 years of stolen weapons, of terrorists with American firepower, of deaths that could be traced back to one man's decision that his own comfort mattered more than the lives he'd sworn to protect. Yes, he said simply. The Brazilian authorities took Michael into custody. Extraction of weapons from the warehouse took another 6 hours. Daniel watched with the detached calm of someone who'd completed a marathon and couldn't quite process that the race was over. His phone rang. Walsh. It's all over international news. Brazilian police are giving you full credit. I don't want credit. I want to make sure this sticks in court. It will. We've got testimony from 2 of his buyers plus physical evidence. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Walsh paused. For what it's worth, Carter, you did good work. There's a position opening up. Deputy Director of International Operations. It's yours if you want it. Daniel looked at the favela stretching up the hillside, thought about people living here who had nothing to do with any of this. He thought about his daughter and the years of neglect he needed to repair, about the cost of obsession and what it meant to finally be free of it. I'll let you know, he said, and hung up. 6 months later, Daniel sat in a coffee shop in Portland, waiting. His daughter had finally agreed to meet him, after he'd sent her a long letter explaining everything, not the classified details, but the human ones, the choices he'd made and why, the regrets he carried, the understanding that he couldn't undo the past but wanted the chance to build something different. She walked in, and he stood, uncertain whether to hug her or wait for her to decide. She looked so much like her mother. It hurt. Hi, Dad, she said. And there was warmth there, tentative but real. Hi, sweetheart. They sat, and for the first time in years, Daniel talked about something other than the job. About her life, her work, her hopes. About being present instead of haunted. About learning that sometimes the hardest victory isn't catching the ghost, but learning to stop chasing them. Outside, rain began to fall on the city, washing streets clean. And in a federal prison in Brazil, Michael Reeves sat in a cell and thought about the man who'd been his best friend, and how the greatest betrayal isn't always what it seems. The ghost wasn't Michael. The ghost was what we become when the system stops seeing us as human. Sometimes it's the moment when someone you counted on to be corruptible proves that honor still means something. Sometimes it's discovering that the person you manipulated most carefully was the one who saw through you all along. And sometimes, the ghost you were so certain you'd become turns out to be nothing more than a reflection after all. So, that's the end of this story, but there are plenty of other great ones right here. Before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that little bell.